Alright, so first video. Let's do this. What's going on everyone, and welcome to my very first video. My name is the_synchro guy, but you can just call me Synchro. And for my first video, I thought we could talk about the brand new Yu-Gi-Oh TCG Banlist that just got revealed. Now, a lot of people have stated their opinions about it, but I wanted to share my thoughts and opinions about the whole thing. So let's go over the list and discuss about them. Now, this list has brought some interesting changes for the future TCG metagame. None of it is groundbreaking and it's not gonna change the game entirely, but it has made some interesting choices worth talking about. Now keep in mind, this list I'm going over is affecting the TCG, which is everywhere but Asia. Asia is basically OCG. So if you do not live in the TCG, then this list will not affect you in any way. Anyway, let's get into this list. First off, on the forbidden section, and the only thing that's newly forbidden is Zodiac Barrage. Man, Zodiacs can't catch a break. They were only trying to help up a fellow archetype, and now they got hit. Again. Poor Zodiacs. Anyway, for those of you that don't know, the reason why this card got hit is because the best deck of the current format is basically this deck called Tri-Brigade, or more specifically, the Zodiac Tri-Brigade version is the most popular one. So Tri-Brigade is a popular archetype that is capable of spamming out any Beast, Beast Warrior, and or Winged Beast Link monsters. And other Link monsters in general, but they tend to prefer Beast Warrior, Winged Beast monsters. Not only can they summon out a bunch of monsters in a single turn, but they can also banish a bunch of monsters to your graveyard that can summon out any Beast Warrior, Winged Beast Link monsters from your extra deck to the field. And alright, that's pretty powerful. The reason why the Zodiac part got hit though is, well, for a couple of different reasons. First off, the Zodiac part allows the Tri-Brigades to get a bunch of fuel into the graveyard that they need to summon out a bunch of their monsters. And secondly, the Zodiac archetype is an Xyz focused archetype, which means they have access to one of the most powerful Xyz monsters ever created in this game's history, and that is Double Zeus Sky Thunder. So basically, if you get Zodiac monster on board, you can either fill up your graveyard and or get a powerful monster like Zeus onto the field. Basically, by hitting the Zodiac Barrage, it's limiting the Tri-Brigade's power from accessing the Zodiac part and being able to do either of those two things. In other words, they just hit the deck's consistency a bit. While yes, this does hurt the deck's consistency a bit, it doesn't quite do too much on lowering their consistency. We'll talk more about that in a bit. Moving on to the limited section, we have Ava. Now, Ava here has been limited due to the fact that it's been used a lot in this deck called Drytron. Drytron is a ritual focus based deck that can summon out a whole bunch of ritual monsters like crazy. The reason why Eva is part of the deck is because the Drytron deck tends to use a couple of monsters that are pretty fairy based type despite them being machines. But the ones they like to use the most is the Cyber Angel archetype, which are pretty fairy based types, along with other cards like Diviner of the Herald and Herald of the Orange Light. And basically what Eva does is that once it's sent to the graveyard, you can banish a couple of fairy monsters from your graveyard to search out a number of fairy monsters equal to the number that's banished, maximum of 2 of course. So by using Ava's effect, they can basically get like both a Herald of the Orange Light and Diviner of the Herald into their hand. This is usually done during the opponent's turn, which means they either have an extra negation on board due to the effect of Herald of the Orange Light, or if they didn't need to use the Herald, then they could just use Diviner of the Herald as a follow-up for their next turn. And the reason why this card was limited instead of being banned is because, well, Ava was being used up to as 2 copies in a Drytron deck. So basically it's trying to lower the deck's access to having a couple of negations on board, which previously they would usually tend to have like 2 to 3 negations on board. Mostly 2, but still. But even if they couldn't use the Herald of the Orange Light's negation, they could also use it as just like fodder for one of the ritual monsters the Drytron deck likes to summon. That being Herald of Perfectionism and or Herald of Ultimateness. Whichever the Drytron player prefers. And there have been times where some Drytron players have managed to use Ava twice. Once during their turn and once during the opponent's turn. And basically with that they can again get some more fodder either for their Herald ritual monsters or just be able to use Herald of the Orange Light's negation effect. Basically, hitting the Ava just lowers the deck's chances of negating stuff you would be able to do. But even with this hit, the dry turn deck is still very powerful, and so you can still build an incredible board if left uninterrupted. So yeah, limiting Ava does not stop the dry turn deck from being meta altogether, so don't count on dry turns just yet. Next up on the limited list is Prank Kids Meow Meow Mew. Man, the deck just won the first ever remote duel YCS here in the US, and Konami's way of congratulating it is by limiting one of their favorite cards. For shame. Anyway, while Prank Kids isn't necessarily the best deck of the format, and some probably wouldn't even consider it to be tier 1, it still managed to top a bunch of remote duels here and there. And Konami seems to think if this deck continues to be left unchecked, it might get a little too crazy, so they decided to hit their favorite card, Meow Mew. Meow Mew is a fan favorite card in the archetype, since it is a Link 1 monster that makes all of your Prank Kids main deck monsters into 1-card starters. But now that Meow Mew has been limited, once you summon your 1 Meow Mew, you won't be able to have that 1-card starter anymore. Unless you recycle the Meow Mew, of course, which the Prank Kids deck is capable of doing, but they may not always want to do that for the fact that Meow Mew also has an effect in the graveyard where if you have a Prank Kids monster that would tribute itself as cost to activate one of its effects, you could banish the Meow Mew from your graveyard instead. And one of the Prank Kids' other favorite monsters to use is a monster called Battle Butler, which has an effect where by tributing it, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls. And if you use Meow Mew's effect to substitute it instead of having to tribute the Battle Butler, you could basically use this effect again on the opponent's turn if they have any more follow-up, because Battle Butler's effect is not once per turn. Overall, you just have to pick your poison. But I will say, if you do summon a monster like Battle Butler during the opponent's turn, you will have a central follow-up for your next turn if you can stop your opponent. So it won't be too devastating having just 1 Meow Mew for the deck. But also keep in mind that if your opponent manages to negate the summon of your Meow Mew or manages to negate the effect of the Prank Kids monster used to summon the Meow Mew, say like by using a card like Ash Blossom, well then the deck's gonna really struggle unless they have any follow-up. If they do not, they're going up a creek without a paddle at that point. Finally, what's newly limited is Fire Formation Tenki. This is also another indirect hit to the Zodiac Tri-Brigade deck. Of course, hitting this not only makes it harder for the deck to get access to Zodiac monsters, but also makes it a bit harder to get access to one of the deck's favorite Tri-Brigade monsters, being Fractal. I mean, it's practically the only Tri-Brigade monster that can be searched by Tenki. And Fractal's a good one since it's not only a 1900 beater, or 2000 beater if you have Tenki on the field, but it can also fill up the graveyard for your Tri-Brigade monsters so they can use their effects. Again, just like Barrage, hitting this card down to 1 it only hurts the deck's consistency, sure, but it doesn't really stop Tri-Brigade from being the best deck of the format. So yeah, hitting the card like Tenki doesn't really hurt the deck all too much. Moving on to the semi-limited section, we have Danger Nessie moving up from 1 copy to 2 copies. This is an interesting choice since this card, along with Danger's Jackalope and Tsuchinoko, both went down to 1 due to the fact that they just can help a deck turbo out like crazy. And if it's a more danger-focused style, well then, oh boy. While Jackalope and Tsuchinoko are still currently limited here in the TCG, it's still interesting that Konami decided to bring Nessie up to 2. Now, my initial thought, I don't think we're going to start seeing Danger start going turbo crazy like before. I think Konami's mostly just testing out the waters a bit and seeing if it's possible to bring a card like Nessie off the list. Still though, knowing how crazy the Danger archetype was, we best keep our eyes on it just to make sure it doesn't do anything too crazy. Then we have Performing by Skulker by Joker moving up to the semi-limited section. Now this card was hit in the past due to the fact that Pendulum Magician was such a crazy powerful deck. Like from 2017 to 2018, it was like the best deck at the format, despite the fact we were under Master Rule 4 rules. But of course, this card moving up to 2 isn't going to be all that much, because Pendulum Magicians hasn't really done a whole lot, especially since this card went back to 1 on the last Banlist update. Pendulum decks haven't really done a whole lot. In fact, I don't see them doing anything much until Konami decides to give us back Heavy Metal Falls Electric Might, which is anyone's guess when that card's going to come off the list. So until that happens, Joker going to 2 should be fine. Then we have Emergency Teleport moving from limited to semi-limited. Now this is an interesting change to the list. Emergency Teleport, also known as E-Tele, is a very, very powerful card. Being able to special summon any level 3 or lower psychic monster from your hand or deck, mostly from your deck, to the field is very powerful. And since it's not once per turn, you can come up with some very interesting plays. Now, obviously, this move was made to promote one of the new upcoming archetypes that's being released in the Grand Creators booster set. The archetype being the Punk archetype, which is full of a bunch of main deck monsters that are level 3 psychic monsters. So this move is most likely to help sell the Grand Creators booster set. However, moving into 2 is still very interesting because there is another archetype that's really good right now that can actually use it. That archetype being Virtual World. Virtual World is also an archetype that has a bunch of level 3 psychic monsters. And they tend to really need to have a Virtual World card on the field in order to start turboing off. And with a card like E-Telling now up to 2, that makes it a little bit easier for the deck to achieve that goal. Now, I'm not saying Virtual World is going to become the best deck of the format because E-Telling went to 2, but Virtual World is still very powerful, and this might help the deck out a lot, so we'll have to keep our eyes out on this. Then finally, moving on to the Unlimited section, we only had one thing come off the list, and that is Double Iris Magician. Now, this is pretty much going back to what I said about when we talked about Joker. Pendulum Magicians hasn't done a whole lot, especially when, Joker and this card moved up on the list. And I don't see that happening until we get Electromite or another Broken Pendulum archetype get released. So Double Iris Magician isn't going to change the TCG main game a whole lot. Alright, now let's talk about a couple of things about how the TCG metagame is going to look moving forward. First off, I still see Tri-Game being the best deck of the format. They may have lost some consistencies with the banning of Barrage and the limiting of Tanky. That's still not going to hurt the deck a lot. They can actually easily fill in the gaps by using cards like Pawn of Desires or Pawn of Prosperity in order to fill in the gaps. So yeah, I don't see Zodiac Tri-Game getting kicked off the metagame ladder anytime soon yet. As for Drytron, that deck can still facilitate an incredible board if they go on uninterrupted. They may have lost like one little extra negation, but they still have some plain negations on board that can still be enough to take down their opponents. Not to mention, if you're not aware, Drytron has actually been testing the waters with the Dragoon engine, and they've seen some pretty good success with it. So if anything, losing that one Ava, they could just basically throw in the Dragoon engine to fill in the missing gap and call it a day. So yeah, Drytron is not going anywhere anytime soon. Then there's Virtual World, which got a bit of a boost now that E-Telly is up to 2 copies. Now again, this move isn't going to make Virtual World the best deck of the format, but still, it's still a very powerful deck, and it's still going to continue to be one as we continue to move forward, and unless we get something else that's more powerful, more crazy than this deck, which come Burst of Destiny, we may very well see happen. But still, keep your eyes on Virtual World. It's still a very good deck to choose if you're looking to get into the metagame of Yu-Gi-Oh! Finally, there's Prank Kids, which isn't hurt too much, but having Mew going down to 1 does kind of suck, but the deck can still combo on turbo like crazy if they do not get interrupted. So while, yeah, Prank Kids is not exactly the best deck, but it is still an interesting deck, and it can still do incredible stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how this deck is going to adapt moving forward, but I won't count on Prank Kids just yet. Now, to close this off, let's talk about some of the cards that this list did not touch. I mentioned this earlier, and that being Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, which did not get hit anywhere on this list. And this is very interesting because this card is super powerful, and being a freaking towers-like boss monster, just whew. Many players were hoping to see this card get hit, or any of the cards that help make him possible, like Periplan, Vertigo, and Anaconda, or Red Eyes Fusion get hit, but as we saw, that did not happen. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes, especially since we have Burst of Destiny coming out in November. And the reason why this is interesting is because Burst of Destiny is going to include some new support for Destiny heroes, and one of those supports is this card called Destiny Hero Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. And this is very interesting because we've seen the OCG actually use this card in a bunch of decks that are not Destiny Hero. Basically, they've created what's known as the Destiny Hero engine, and it's basically kind of similar to the Dragoon engine. So this Destiny Hero engine is almost like a different model brand of the Dragoon engine. With Destroy Phoenix Sorcerer being around the same time as Dragoon, it's going to be interesting to see if players are going to want to try this other engine. Because Destroy Phoenix Sorcerer is no Dragoon by any means, but he's still very good due to the fact that, well, he can not only weaken some of your opponent's monsters while he's on the field, but as a quick effect, he can destroy a card your opponent controls. Basically, just interrupt your opponent's plays and instead have to wait for your opponent to activate something for you to negate. Plus, if Destroy Phoenix Forcer gets destroyed, you can satchel something back to your field during the next standby phase, which is very good. Of course, Dragoon is still a very powerful monster on itself, since he is a 3000 monster that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects, could pop a monster your opponent controls, sometimes two of them, and again is able to negate practically anything. But still, it's going to be very interesting to see if players are going to hop onto this new Destiny Hero engine and drop the Dragoon engine. Now, I'm not saying Dragoon is going to go bye-bye once Burst of Destiny gets released, but it's still going to be very interesting to see how this is going to go down once we get Burst of Destiny. And the last card I want to talk about that did not get held on this list is Mystic Mind. This card recently has been receiving some major attention due to the fact that we recently got the OCG ban list beforehand, and on that list they banned Mystic Mind. And then was very interesting because before the OCG banned it, it was at 1 in that format for a good couple of years. But to the OCG, it was not enough to keep the card around, and they had to ban it. So this gave many TCG players some hope that we might have seen the same change happen on our list, but that did not happen. So I guess this means Konami does not see Mystic Mind being too much of a problem. So they decided to keep it around for the time being. I know a lot of players are not very happy about this, but I will say, if you want Mystic Mind gone, then maybe you should start considering playing a deck that focuses a lot on using this card. If you do, and go and start winning or topping a bunch of Yu-Gi-Oh events, the remote duels, then you might get Konami's attention and they might be willing to negotiate. Now, I want to give out quickly my thoughts on this list. I honestly am indifferent about this whole list altogether. Well, yes, the list does not change a whole lot of things. The current meta decks are still going to be meta as we're moving forward. So it doesn't bring out a new change of things, which was the thing that main players were hoping for. But honestly, I don't mind it too much. While yes, the meta is still going to be the same, but it's not all that bad. We have a pretty diverse format. We've even seen some decks that are not considered to be the best decks of the format do well at some of these major Yu-Gi-Oh tournaments. We've seen decks like Thananize, Dragon Link, heck, even Altergeist being able to do well. While it's not as frequent as some of these other decks, it's still very incredible and honestly very cool. To me, we're a pretty good format right now. I don't see any reason to change all that too much. And again, we're going to have some new stuff coming up in the future, so change is going to come. We just have to be patient. But anyway, those are all my thoughts. Let me know what your thoughts about this new ban list in the comment section below. Do you love it? Is it okay? Do you think Konami didn't do enough on this list? I would love to hear your thoughts. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you want to see more videos, because I'm just going to start making more videos in the coming future. And I've got something pretty cool and exciting coming up, so be sure to look forward to it. Anyway guys, I'll see you guys in the next one, and I hope you have/had an awesome day today.